Hello, this video is going to be about creating shrouds or rigging for the larger scale Airfix sailing ship models, things like the Endeavour or the Victory, Golden Hind, Sark, things like that. I'm going to be talking about using the frame, doing the threading of the shrouds and attaching them to the ship. So first of all, the frame. Here is one of the frames. And the first thing we notice, of course, is that it's in two sections, two halves. This is the top half, and this is the bottom half. So the first thing we have to do is to separate them from the runner, like so. Now the top half, on the front, we see there are these three kind of rectangles here, which are labeled X, Y, and Z, X, Y, and Z. And there's little holes near them. And down each side are these little notches. And they start off at 0, and then they're numbered in increments of 5 units, 5, 10, 15, 20, etc. And we don't need to worry about this, so we just ignore that. And on the bottom half along the front, we have notches along the bottom. And again, these are measured out starting from 0 and then increments of 5 going right to left, 5, 10, 15, 20, that way. Now going back to the first one, turning it onto it's the reverse side, we see that there are little prongs here, and the first of these prongs are labelled A, B, C, D, E on both sides. And on the bottom half, on the back, there's really nothing much to see other than the fact we have these holes. And their importance will become clear in a moment. So that's the frame. Now, over here we have the instructions. I'm going to be using the Endeavour as my example. And this is what we get. And we have the shrouds are labelled C1, C2, C3, 4, 5, and 6. And we should notice that each shroud is in fact a pair, the one on this side and the one on the other side of the ship. And if we look down, here are the letters going C1 to C6, which correspond to each one of these up here, C1 to 6. The next line says position, and we have, in all cases, the position is C. Underneath that, we have the start, and in each case, it's Z or Z if you're living in the States listening to this. The next line gives number of horizontal threads, 27, 31, 16, etc. The next line reads horizontal notches, and we have 2 to 29, 2 to 33. The next line has the number of vertical threads, 4, 4, 3, etc. And the number of vertical notches, 7, 11, 14, 18 in the first case, 7, 10, 14, 20. So this is the information that we use to create these shrouds using the frame. So, putting all that together, let's look at the making of C5 and C6. I've already made the other shrouds and put them on the model, so we're going to be looking at C5 and C6. C5 and C6. So it says that the position is C. So what that means is we get our frame, we turn it to the back, and we look to where it says C. I don't know if you can actually see these, but it says A, B, C on the side. And so we get the bottom half of the frame, and we put the holes from the bottom half of the frame through the prongs such that we can see C just sitting above it. So C is the letter that's visible immediately above where the bottom half of the frame has been attached to the top half of the frame. So we've created a frame with position C. And turned it back over to the front side again. And back over here it says start at Z. We're going to set that aside for a second. We'll come back to that in a moment. And instead look at the next line, which is number of horizontal threads. And so it says 36 and 27. Now, that is the number of threads that are going to be going acrossways, horizontally. And then it says the horizontal notches 2 to 38. This is for C5, 2 to 38. So that's what we need to do first. So we get our thread. Now, the thread that comes with the models is typically white thread, but in my experience, all of the ships, the rigging, the shrouds, use black coloured rope. And so I just use black thread just to save the hassle of having to colour it. But, you know, each to his own, whatever. Now, we need to take the thread from here to here, over the back, then down the next line, over the back and down the next line. So the first thing we do is we simply have to secure the thread to the frame. And so I just start using the hole nearest to the notch that I'm going to be starting with. So if you recall, the notch for C5, the notches are 2 to 38, and we go left to right. So notch 2 will be just down here. So I'm going to use this hole and put it in. So first of all, I'll just tie that that thread through the relevant hole. Okay, so there's the thread just tied into the nearest hole. And there's different ways of doing this, but this is just what I do. I pull off a good amount of thread, long enough that I get a good amount to use, and just cut it off. So I have an individual thread. Okay, so I put the thread into notch 2. I then take it over to the corresponding notch 2 on the right hand side of the frame, put it over, bring it around the back, put it into notch 2 again, and then thread it under the threads I've already put on, through the frame like that, and then grab it, bring it around again, and put it into notch 3. So I'll do this with the next one again, so you see again what I'm doing. So it's now in notch 3. I take it across to notch 3 on this side, take it back across the back of the frame, and again into notch 3, bring it back, and then feed it through the frame. Get it nice and tight, so you can sort of see how it's down there. Bring it back around and put it into notch 4. Take it across, put it into notch 4, back around, again into notch 4, and feed it through the frame under the threads I've threaded. Back around again and into notch 5 and back over. And you just have to keep on doing this until you run out of thread. So I've done a few passes over and I'm running out of thread now. So I will need to tie off this thread here along the side, get some more thread and carry on. Obviously, the longer the thread is that you start with, the more of these horizontal lines you can do in one go. Okay, so now I've tied it off. To tie it off, all I've done is to take the thread through under the line here, the line of thread here, and tied it, and then back through and tied it. So that's how it's been tied off. And I've also, just for good measure, I stick a little bit of blue tack on the back there where the tie is, just to hold it all in place, making sure that the blue tack doesn't cover the next notches I need to use. I'll show you the whole process of tying off with another round so you see it. So we get some more thread and carry on. Okay, so I've tied some more thread onto this side, wrapped it around, and we can continue. Now you'll notice that we're now getting to a position where there's not much room underneath here to thread the cotton through. So I'll show you what we're going to do with that in a moment. So now we can use, we'll get to use the crossbar. So we put the thread down here and back around. So it's not much different. It's just wrapping it around the crossbar as opposed to around the sidebar. And we continue to thread. And again, we're now running out of thread, so we're just going to have to tie it off and start again. So a good way to do it here, again using some blue tack, is to just put some blue tack in to hold it in place and then tie it off. I'm just going to tie it around here. So there I've just tied some thread on the frame, pass it through and press on. So I've reached the end of a piece of thread here, so I'll just show you how I tie it off as we go. So you get the piece of thread, get the end of the thread, you pop it through the last cotton you've threaded across, bring it back and do that again. And it's done. This one slipped down a knot, so I just got to put it back up. And then just cut it there. Okay, so now we've done all the horizontal threads. We've gone from notch 2 down to notch 38. Now we have to do the vertical threads, and as you will recall from our instructions, we start at Z. So we're going to tie some thread on in this hole and put it up into Z and take it down. And this box tells us that there, for C5, the one we're making, that there are 7 vertical threads, and they go into those notches, 7 to 27. So we're going to be doing into 7 first. Okay, so we've tied it off, and now we're going to take the we're going to do the vertical threads. So the first one is at 7, so we find 7 on the bottom here and pass it through. Back up. The next one is 10. Back up. The next one is 12. The next one is 15. The next one is 18. Next one is 24. And the final one is 27. And we can just use our old friend blue tack to hold it in place. I've only just got enough thread, so I'm probably not going to have enough to tie it off, but the blue tack should hold it anyway. And so there we have our finished shroud. It's always a good idea to check that they've gone into all the right notches, because it's so easy to get them in the wrong ones and then you go to all the effort to make the shroud and then it still doesn't fit, which is annoying. But I think this one's good. You may remember I mentioned that these shrouds are in pairs. And so here with our frame, we've got one shroud here on this side, but on the back, we've got a second shroud. So we've got our pair. So that's great. But we can actually double up again. We've got all this horizontal thread over here, which isn't going to be used, because this is our shroud and this is just kind of redundant. So we can use this. All we need to do is to find another shroud on the diagram, and it's good to sort of plan ahead with this, as indeed I have here, to make over here. And it just takes a little bit of extra thinking to work out. So C6 has 27 threads. Now we've did 36 threads with this one, so it's always the case that if we're going to double up on the shrouds, that our second shroud has to have the same number or fewer horizontal threads than our first shroud. I'll just say that again. We're going to be doing another shroud over here using this, what would be wasted horizontal threads, but our second shroud has to have the same or fewer number of horizontal threads, because we only have a total of 36, so we can't make another shroud over here with more than 36 horizontal threads. So C6 has 27, so that's fine. That's the first thing. And the second thing is the data down here says that C6 has 4 vertical threads going at 7, 11, 15, and 19. Now we can't use those numbers because they've already been used for our existing shroud, but if we just reset the first one, 7, to be whatever is the first notch that is available to the left, then all the others just fall into line. What do I mean by that? I'll show you. So remember that it's 7, 11, 15, and 19. So they're in fact going up in increments of 4. Now, down here, we've got some free notches. If we started, say, here at 30, then we can just go 4 across, 4 across, 4 across, 4 across, and that will create the shroud C6. So 7, 11, 15, and 19 have become 30, 34, 38, 42. So that's how we do it. So let's just do that now. Okay, so we've tied it on at the top there, and we're going to go down and we're going to start with 30. And we know we just need to go up in increments of 4. So we go back up there along the top, keeping it as far to the right as possible. And we'll go to 34. Back up. 38. Back up. And 42. And back up, keeping it at the far right part of the rectangle. Check we've got the right ones. Looks right to me. And a bit of blue tack to hold it in place. And we can cut it and tie it off. So there we have our 2 shrouds, C5 and C6. The next thing we have to do is to put liquid glue on them so that they go rigid. We have to remember that with the double up one, that we don't put the glue down on the threads beyond the threads that we need. So we're going to stop at thread 24. So we've got here, it was 2 to 38 and 2 to 24. So we'll, with C5, we will put the liquid glue on to 38, but with C6, we'll stop at 24. Probably the best thing to use is super glue and a brush, no mucking around. Get plenty on our brush and then just paint the glue onto the shrouds. Make sure not to glue the shroud to the frame in this process, and also that we don't have any sort of strange kind of window panes forming of glue as well. Just paint them away as you go. Another way to get rid of those window panes of glue is to use the cocktail stick. You can even pull the threads apart until the panes break. You really don't want them forming on your final shroud. Don't put the glue down beyond the bottom thread, because you want these to be reasonably flexible for manipulating onto the ship. Likewise at the top, try and avoid getting too much glue up here. So I'm just doing the glue down to 24 on this one, because we're not going to be using any of this. Try and avoid beads forming as well, because they will look weird, obviously. So again, the cocktail stick should get rid of those as much as possible. There's more of those window panes. Now I have put 2 coats of liquid glue onto the shroud. Put one on, waited for it to dry, and put a second one on. You find the second one on goes on much easier. And you can just focus on any areas, obviously, where it seems to be still not quite glued down. Waited for that to dry, and then touched up any little areas that needed it because of beading or whatever, with a little bit of black paint. And we're now in a position to remove the shrouds from the frame. So I shall do that. There are our 2 pairs of shrouds, first pair, second pair. So we'll just separate them. We can tidy up the frame, cut away or remove any threads that remain on the frame to reuse the frame. And then with these now, we get a nice sharp knife, nice fresh blade, and go through the process of trimming them. Obviously, you try and trim as closely as possible without actually cutting through the vertical thread. I'll just do one as an example, one of the shrouds. Okay, so remember with the one set of shrouds, they were going to have too many horizontal threads. We only need 27. This has got more than that. So some of them have dropped away because they weren't glued. Some are still glued. So we're just going to have to remove those so we get to the 27. If a thread has come off, as has happened here, I'm missing there, you obviously can just put another thread across there and glue it on. But I find quite often it's very hard to get them to sit there. They keep bouncing off, and almost like no amount of super glue will hold it there long enough for it to stay. Now, what I do is I find that if you get the replacement thread and you thread it through, not necessarily alternately, but perhaps just under and through there, over the top, and then back under in the far one, then the tension of the shroud holds the replacement piece of thread in place. And you can't really notice that one thread is interwoven with the others as opposed to sitting on top or sitting behind. So I'll just show you what I mean by doing that. Like this and popping it through over the top, and then getting a bit of excess to play with, and then popping it through. And, oops, popping it through and grabbing it. Hopefully. There we go. And it's sitting in there. And then you can just cut it off. It'll stay in there quite well, and then you just put some more super glue over that and it will stay there nice and solid. And another little tip is it's so easy to get these shrouds confused when you're putting them on, knowing which one was which. So there were 6 pairs of shrouds that we're making for this model. So it's a good idea to have some way of keeping them hung up in a way that's in order. So there's 6 little cocktail sticks on here, and you can just put each pair 1 to 6 going left to right, and always make sure you're doing it, and put them in nice and high in the cocktail stick, and then they'll sit quite well behaved, and you can let them dry, obviously keeping them apart from each other so they don't stick to each other. Okay, so now we're reaching the end of the process. Here is the model. It's the Endeavour. It's still sort of being worked on at the moment, but we can put the shroud on. Got the model on its side, and we take one of the shrouds and we put it through the little slot up there, and then the vertical lines match up with the little lugs here attached to the chains, and we super glue the shroud in at the top and then trim it up in here, and the excess poking through. And there's a number of ways of attaching the shroud to the bottom here. I just simply super glue them to the outside there, hold them tight. If you use a little cocktail stick to hold them in and then just roll it off, and trimming them. If the scale is larger and allows you to put these shrouds through little holes at the top here, then obviously you can do that, but whatever suits you. So I'll just go ahead and do that very quickly. I won't do all of it, just some of it. Well, there's the finished model. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you found it useful and interesting. All the very best with your model making. Bye.